We're diving into a story today that honestly feels like it blurs the lines between history and some kind of dark fantasy. It's the life of Baron Roman Ungern-Sternberg. Just imagine. A European noble, totally driven by these wild prophecies, a mix of Eastern mysticism, and frankly, a brutal military outlook, trying to carve out a new empire in Asia.
It sounds like fiction, doesn't it? But it's the astonishingly true story of this figure. So bizarre, so terrifying that even people back then just couldn't quite get their heads around him.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into the, let's say, extraordinary life and the often horrific accomplishments of Baron Ungern-Sternberg. You probably know him as the Bloody White Baron.
That's the one. And our sources, they give us this fascinating, though often really disturbing, look into what made him tick. His military campaigns, the impact he had, which was often devastating, lasting.
Yeah. So our mission here is to really pull out the key insights from the text we have. We want to give you a clear picture of what Ungern-Sternberg actually achieved, from his early days right through his dramatic rise and inevitably his fall in Mongolia.
And maybe understand a bit more why the story still has such a grip, why it continues to intrigue people.
Right. So let's get into it. Where do we even start with someone like this?
Yeah.
His early life must have been something, huh?
Oh, definitely. So he was born Nikolai Roman Maximilian von Ungern-Sternberg, Graz, Austria, 1885. His father was Estonian, but of German blood, and his mother was German.
Okay.
And what's kind of weird is even his name, Ungern, apparently means unwillingly or reluctantly, and Sternberg is Star Mountain. Later on, people made these nasty anti-Semitic jokes about it, which, looking back, feels like this grim foreshadowing of his later ideas.
Wow. And his family, the Ungern-Sternbergs. They were really something else, weren't they? The sources talk about this fierce pride in their, warlike ancestors.
Oh, yeah. Figures with names like the Axe and the Brother of Satan, seriously. They were obsessed with their family's role back in the Crusades.
Intense. But there was also something maybe a bit more immediate, wasn't there? An ancestor who was a pirate.
Right, Otto von Ungern-Sternberg. Back in the 18th century, apparently he was a wrecker and a pirate on this Baltic island, Hiiumaa. The text sort of suggests Ungern later transformed this gruesome heritage, as they put it, into the more, quote, glamorous practice of privateering.
Huh. So this legacy of violence, it was baked in from the start. How did that, plus his early personal life, shape him?
Well, it clearly laid some groundwork, and his childhood wasn't easy. His parents split when he was about 6. His dad had a mental collapse. School records mention him having a bad attitude towards his stepfather. And he spent holidays on that island, Hiiumaa, which his family had basically ruled for 200 years. Legends about his pirate great-great-grandfather were still doing the rounds. So yeah, this constant exposure to his family's violent past, it really became part of who he thought he was.
So you've got this kid soaking up violent family legends, and then he runs headlong into the chaos of the early 20th century. Our sources call this period the ends of the world. This seems to be where his ideology really starts to lock in, right?
Absolutely. He was only 19 when he volunteered for the Russo-Japanese War in 1904. Just an ordinary soldier hoping he could somehow help turn things around for Russia.
Already driven by that sense of duty or something.
Seems like it. The texts say he was steeped in Russian military tradition, had a strong sense of national pride. But then came the 1905 revolutions. That really hit him hard.
How so?
Well, he saw the unrest, the peasant revolts back in Estonia. His family's own manor house got burned down, and this experience, it just cemented his view. He saw peasants as basically feral animals. And he became convinced the whole revolution was being run by Jews and intellectuals. He clung to this old medieval idea, the great chain of being. Everyone has their fixed place. Hierarchy is natural for him. Imperial rule, monarchy, that was the natural order of things. God-given, almost.
And it wasn't just politics swirling around. St. Petersburg back then was apparently full of occult stuff.
Oh, yeah. Rife with occultism, as one source puts it. Ungern got really interested in Tibetan and Hindu philosophy. He even had a relative by marriage, Hermann Kaiserling, who thought he was one of the most metaphysically and occultly gifted men. Said he had clairvoyant abilities and these really unsettling gimlet eyes.
Okay, so he's mixing military tradition, anti-revolutionary fervor, and now mysticism. How does that connect to his later actions? This is quite a cocktail.
It's a potent mix. And what's really key here is how his interest in mysticism got tangled up with his growing anti-Semitism. He got into theosophy, which in Russia often looked like esoteric Buddhism and this idea of hidden masters of the world.
Right.
But that quickly morphed, blended with these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about evil forces. He was reading stuff like The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, misinterpreting Jewish beliefs. It all led him to this bizarre conviction in the eventual triumph of righteousness by the yellow race over the West, which he saw as this deadly white peril.
Wow, that's a lot. So he sees the East rising against a corrupt West.
Sort of, yeah. It gave him this cosmic spiritual justification for his xenophobia and his hatreds.
But then, despite these pretty extreme views, he finds a place with the Cossacks. That seems like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? He joined the Transbaikal Cossacks and apparently really liked their company, especially the Buryat Mongols, who were about 12% of the force there. He learned their language, their customs, developed a deep liking for the region and its peoples. He saw their way of life as simple, appealing, and pure.
So how does he square that with his whole yellow race versus white peril thing, especially being a white aristocrat himself?
It's definitely one of the major contradictions in his, well, twisted worldview. He somehow imagined this multi-ethnic combination of the peoples living together, but under his kind of order, a God-blessed monarchy, with him playing a key role, obviously.
Okay.
And this blend of military drive and religious ideas led to this really strange plan. While he was stationed out in Daria, he claimed he tried to start an order of military Buddhists.
An order of military Buddhists.
Seriously?
Yeah. For an uncompromising fight against the depravity of revolution, he wanted 300 men wholly bold and entirely ferocious. Now, the sources say maybe this was just a drunken scheme or even pure fantasy.
Right.
But it shows you where his head was at, even early on. This drive to fuse war and religion, setting the stage for what he'd try to do later in Mongolia.
So World War I breaks out. Ungern must have seen this as his moment, right?
Absolutely. He was mobilized in July 1914, sent to the Nerchinsk Regiment on the Eastern Front, and this is where we see some of his, well, undeniable military accomplishments, however unsettling the context.
What do the sources say about his performance?
They say he loved the war, actually thrived in the middle of the slaughter. His own superiors called him an exemplar to the other officers and soldiers. He was apparently always in the forefront of every charge, volunteering for the most dangerous missions.
So genuinely brave, but maybe disturbingly comfortable with violence? That's exactly the picture painted. It wasn't just courage. It was like he found his element in that brutality.
And this earned him recognition. I remember reading about the Cross of St. George.
Yes. A major accomplishment for him. September 22nd, 1914, he won the Cross of St. George, 4th class. The citation mentions him scouting enemy positions, getting incredibly close, only 400 or 500 steps from the enemy positions, under fierce rifle and artillery fire.
Wow.
He got 4 other medals, too, but that Cross of St. George, it had a special place for him. He'd apparently wore it almost all the time.
What does winning that specific award tell us about him, then? About his approach?
It shows he was utterly fearless, zero regard for his own life, but also maybe tactically smart in a way. He wasn't just charging blindly. He was gathering vital intelligence in the most dangerous way possible. It really cemented his reputation for daring, which became crucial later on.
Okay, so fast forward past the revolution. Russia's in chaos. The Civil War is raging. Ungern throws in his lot with Adwan Semenov in the Transbaikal region, right? Fighting the Reds.
That's right. Initially, it was pretty scrappy fighting, low-key battles. But even here, Ungern showed this ruthless effectiveness. There's an incident early in 1918. He apparently disarmed a group of revolutionary soldiers who actually outnumbered him 3-1, caught them while they were deep in ideological discussions.
Ah, classic.
Right. And then, interestingly, he just sent them back unarmed to Red territory. The sources point this out as showing his relative magnanimity at this point.
Relative magnanimity. That definitely doesn't sound like the Bloody Baron later on.
No, it doesn't. It suggests maybe, at this stage, his violence wasn't totally indiscriminate yet. It was about achieving a strategic goal, disarming the enemy, not necessarily wholesale slaughter just yet.
And he wasn't just a fighter, was he? He helped Semenov politically, too.
Yeah, quite effectively, it seems. The texts say that with Ungern's help, Semenov managed to negotiate peace between these two feuding Mongol tribes.
That's a significant diplomatic accomplishment. How do they pull that off?
Yeah. They basically appealed to the Mongols' distrust of the Bolsheviks and their sort of traditional loyalty to the old Tsarist system. And crucially, they got these tribes to contribute men to Semenov's anti-Bolshevik army. That was a big boost.
So Ungern's influence is growing. By late 1918, he's basically carved out his own territory.
Pretty much. Semenov becomes the dictator of the Transbaikal region, and Ungern is made commander of Doria. He gets promoted to Major General, a title he was apparently inordinately proud of. And Daria becomes his personal fiefdom, described as unquestionably his personal domain, almost like a near-medieval polity.
Right, under the command of the Black Baron, or the Bloody Baron, or the Mad Baron, as the sources say people called him. How did he run this place?
Well, he openly encouraged requisitions, which really meant plunder to fund his division. But here's a key detail. Unlike a lot of other warlords, the sources stress he never took the opportunity to enrich himself. Everything went to his troops.
Interesting. Disciplined, in his own brutal way.
Extremely. Tolerated no slacking, kept up wartime discipline. And weirdly, for someone with such backward-looking views, he made studying Mongolian compulsory for officers. He even supervised the exams himself and complained if they skipped class.
Compulsory Mongolian lessons? That's unexpected. Shows a certain strategic thinking, maybe. Yeah. Understanding the locals.
Exactly. There was a method to the madness, you could say. He recognized he needed local support, or at least understanding.
And his military force becomes more formalized, too.
Yes, in February 1920, his troops officially become the Asian Cavalry Division. It's recognized as an entirely separate unit, an autonomous power. Semenov himself publicly acknowledges Ungern's division as equal in importance to his own forces. That's a huge achievement in terms of independence.
But Ungern wasn't just content with being a warlord in Siberia, was he? His ambitions were much, much bigger.
Oh, way bigger. He genuinely believed Russia itself, the old Russia, was lost, done for. He thought a new empire would have to be created. And his model, Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan. He wanted to rebuild that empire.
That's what he claimed. An empire stretching from the Amur Mountains to the Caspian Sea. He saw himself as restoring his legacy, even boasted his army was the equal of Genghis Khan's.
Delusions of grandeur, or?
Maybe both. He was also smart enough, or cynical enough, to tap into local Mongolian prophecies about a savior from the north. He started claiming he was sent by God for the salvation of Mongolia.
Did he believe it?
Hard to say for sure. He did apparently admit later, quite chillingly, I wrote it because it sounded good.
Wow. So manipulation alongside the fanaticism. Yeah. He made promises to the Mongolians, right, when he crossed the border?
Yes, 3 big ones, according to the sources. We will place the Bogd upon the throne and restore the autonomous government. We will free the Mongols from the Chinese, and we will build Greater Mongolia. These were incredibly powerful messages for Mongolians suffering under Chinese occupation. It positioned him as a potential liberator.
And then came the attack on Urga, the Mongolian capital, February 1921. This is his big moment, his major military accomplishment.
Absolutely his crowning achievement in his eyes. Urga was held by the Chinese. Ungern's Asian Cavalry Division attacked a mix of Cossacks, Mongol Buryats, Tatars, even about 60 Japanese artillery officers he'd somehow acquired.
A real coalition force.
Definitely. And his banners reflected this mixed symbols of the missing Russian Tsar, Michael II, alongside the Buddhist swastika and the Mongolian Soyombo emblem.
The rescue of the Bogd Khan himself sounds like something out of a movie. How did they manage that?
It was audacious. They targeted the Bogd Khan's palace. There was apparently only one way in that wasn't heavily guarded via the sacred mountain, Bogd-ul-ul.
Okay.
So Tibetan cavalry, these warrior monks, some disguised as if they were just bringing food, infiltrated that way and launched a surprise attack.
No way.
Yeah. The Chinese guards were reportedly terrified, caught completely off guard, outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1. Sources say they barely resisted. Within minutes, like 97 out of 150 guards were dead.
Incredible.
There's even an American merchant there who saw it happen, called it the prettiest piece of cavalry work that one could desire to witness. Then they had to get the Bogd Khan out. He was apparently quite large, so 2 strong Tibetans basically balanced him on a horse.
What an image.
Right. When Ungern heard the news that the Bogd was safe, he apparently just yelled exuberantly, "Now Urga is ours!"
And was it? Did the city fall easily after that?
Pretty much. The rescue shattered Chinese morale. Their officers apparently fled, just abandoned their men. Ungern's troops launched this furious charge into the city. There was fighting through the crooked, smoke-filled streets, but the Chinese resistance just completely collapsed. Over 2,000 tried to flee. Sources say maybe only 800 of the original 3,000 defenders survived. It was described as a total triumph for Ungern.
A triumph built on incredible violence, though.
Undeniably. A military masterstroke, yes, but utterly ruthless. And a sign of worse to come.
So Urga is taken. Ungern has liberated it. What does he do next? He promised to restore the Bod Khan.
And he delivered on that promise, at least ceremonially. He orchestrated this huge grand coronation for the Bod Khan. He even designed new uniforms for his own troops, specific to rank and nationality for the occasion.
To design the uniforms himself.
Apparently. And at the ceremony, Ungern himself, wearing this new red Mongolian coat, his deal, and of course his cross of St. George, rode right behind the Bod Khan in the place of honor. For Ungern, this was a moment of pure happy triumph.
I bet. What did the Bod Khan make of all this? This strange, violent European baron who'd suddenly put him back on the throne?
Well, publicly at least, the Bod Khan heaped praise on him, called Ungern a meritorious person for restoring our independence and the state of Mongolia. He noted Ungern never hurt our people, which seems a bit selective, but maybe focused on Mongolians versus Chinese or Jews, and said he seized Urda in the blink of an eye, a meritorious deed. He even acknowledged the army regime was truly rigorous.
So high praise from the top religious figure in Mongolia. That must have cemented Ungern's position for a time.
Absolutely. It gave him immense legitimacy. And for Ungern, this wasn't just about Mongolia. He saw this restoration as the first blow in the grand campaign of monarchy and good against revolution and evil. He thought this was a massive turning point for Asia. His ultimate goal was monarchy, monarchy, monarchy everywhere. Kings as the only defense against chaos.
A truly sweeping, almost messianic vision. How did he actually run Urga day to day, though? Did he set up a government?
His methods were unique. He apparently conducted state business from just 2 small rooms, or sometimes his jurger, his traditional tent. He had this commandeered Fiat car and would zoom around making surprise inspections at terrifying speeds.
In a Fiat. In Mongolia.
Okay, but the sources also mention an unexpected attention to detail. He demanded reports on everything, especially military stuff, and would just devour them. And here's another surprising accomplishment. He actually tried to modernize the city a bit.
Modernize. How that seems out of character.
Doesn't it? But he reopened the electric station, so Urga had these splendid great arc lights again. And he got the wireless station, which the Chinese had built, working again. These were practical things that actually helped the city. A strange mix of medieval warlords and, well, civic administrator.
But that practical side seems totally overwhelmed by the other stuff, right? The terror. The control.
Completely. His economic policy was basically looting. He plundered Chinese banks and businesses, got an enormous pile of currency. He also fixed prices in Urga super low, which actually choked off imports from China, maybe deliberately, maybe not.
And maintaining control.
Pure terror. He set up this Bureau of Military and Political Affairs. Its job was rooting out traitors, mass arrests, mass executions followed. He apparently took a personal interest in the political killings, even claiming he could discern commissars by sight through some kind of mystic vision.
Oh, cool.
That's what the sources report him claiming. He ordered the deaths of at least 100 or 200 people he deemed disloyal or who challenged him. So yeah, any accomplishments in governance were built on a foundation of absolute fear and bloodshed.
It sounds completely unsustainable, an empire built on terror and charisma. How did it start to unravel?
Well, resources started running out. His support, even among the Mongolians he'd liberated, began to fray. The brutality took its toll. So Ungern decided on a final, desperate gamble. Take the fight back to the Bolsheviks. He marched his army into Russia in June 1921.
And this is when he issues that infamous Order Number 15.
Exactly. It's chilling. It commanded the flat-out extermination of commissars, communists, and Jews together with their families. He declared, truth and mercy are no longer admissible. Henceforth, there can only be truth and merciless hardness. It's pure, fanatical hatred codified as military orders.
Did he have any success on this final campaign?
There was one notable battle, Gluzino-Ozero, at a Buryat Buddhist monastery. He actually used his own transport wagons and wounded soldiers as bait to lure in a Red Army detachment. A pretty brutal tactic.
Using his own wounded as bait.
Yeah. He apparently admired the Reds who fought to the death there, called them clever. But then, from about 400 prisoners they took, he personally identified and had 100 killed, claimed they were commissars or Jews. The rest he reluctantly forced into his own dwindling army.
Ruthless.
And he even had the local monks flogged because they tried to steal supplies from his wagons. Military necessity, in his mind, trumped everything, even religious sanctuary. It really shows how far gone he was.
But this couldn't last. The Soviets were bound to crush him eventually.
Inevitably, he was facing overwhelming Soviet forces. He also finally realized that the Japanese invasion he'd been counting on, or perhaps hallucinating, was a fiction. And the Russian people certainly weren't going to rise up and join him, so he had no choice but to retreat back into Mongolia.
And his own troops had had enough by then.
Completely exhausted. His force was down to maybe 500 men. They mutinied, betrayed him, captured him themselves on August 21st, 1921. After all the battles, the terror, the grand vision, it was his own men who brought him down.
So the end came quickly after that.
Very. He was taken to Novosibirsk, that's Novosibirsk now, for a show trial, September 15th, 1921. It was a big deal, him being the first major white leader captured alive.
Did he defend himself? Deny anything?
He admitted to the crimes, apparently, but he denied collaborating with the Japanese. He proudly talked about his family's 1,000 years of service to Russia, and he insisted his atrocities were divinely sanctioned, right to the end.
No remorse, then?
None reported. He was found guilty, of course, and executed by firing squad that same evening, faced them with stoic courage, the accounts say.
The Bod Khan, the man he put back on the throne.
In a final, really strange twist, when the Bod Khan heard Ungern was dead, he ordered prayers said for his soul throughout Mongolia, a peculiar tribute to the man who briefly restored his kingdom through such brutal means.
What a story. Ungern-Sternberg. He's just this chilling example of how extreme ideology, military ambition, and, let's face it, probably profound psychological issues can combine.
Definitely. And his accomplishments, yes, there were real military victories. He did restore a monarch, however briefly, but they were achieved through just unimaginable brutality. He left this permanent scar on Mongolia and Siberia.
And his legend, it just lingers, doesn't it? In weird ways, folk tales, even far-right occult groups still seem fascinated by him.
He was convicted. The Soviets called him pathologically impulsive. His captors decided he certainly did not have the capacity to run a whole country, and yet.
Yet the power of his conviction, no matter how warped it was, let him bend reality for a while, didn't it? He led men, achieved things that seemed impossible, built a short-lived kingdom.
He absolutely did.
So maybe the question for you, listening, is what does Ungern's story really tell us about that human capacity for both fanatical belief, enough to reshape the world, and for utterly devastating impact, even when the odds seem stacked against you?
And how do we even begin to process the accomplishments of someone like that when they're so deeply intertwined with the horrific way he achieved them? It's a tough one to wrestle with.
It really is.